easy enough. Well, I just get a couple of shots of it.
It used to be free and all these things are taken away in exchange. They were trusted people. Nobody asked them. And they were trusted people because they weren't industrial. They weren't industrial because it doesn't look like home. It's weak. It gets you paid.
We had a lot of talk there, but one of the things that that we asked ourselves was, how do we actually agree on some facts that we can use to be the basis of this conversation about what is good for the West Coast, what is good for the community, what is good for the economy, because we are so often talking at cross purposes and coming up with different interests and different approaches, different science. So how can we try and pull that back and have a basis of facts and evidence that we can then use for a meaningful conversation?
Did you come to a conclusion?
We solved the world's problem. We can announce it today. No, we unfortunately didn't have that much time. So.
We didn't give it to Steve to solve it.
Are there any other questions?
Was one of the unknowns is what causes the two-speed economy, I guess that was to use the word, how we have such disparities between what are, well-paid mining jobs, for example, and then a lot of other jobs across the community that are relatively low-paid, and the transition is so great. So what has caused that? Has it been, well, we didn't answer it.
Well, that's a question. Excellent. Steve.
You go.
Question. How do we, can't word it as a question. The focus around quality of life, why does the focus on industry and industry-led development seem to trump questions around quality of life and why people want to be here?
I think it wasn't a question, but I think we started to get to a place in the conversation where we had some shared agreement on what were some baselines we wanted to achieve. And for me, I would posit it was something like secure, meaningful, lasting work on the coast.
Kind of got buried, but can we solve the climate crisis? When I say solve, it won't ever be solved, but can we address it in the current market economy?
Who would be involved in the groups or committees or steering groups or whatever they're going to be? Who would be involved in that group to start that campaign off? Because you've got to start somewhere, don't you?
We're going to answer that now.
And I suppose another one is that, which comes into that, which might help you answer a little bit, I suppose, is that how do we find out what people that need to transition, want to transition to, and what do future coasters see in it? How do we get people to engage?
We had I'll go here, start at the back to anyone. I've got a go-to, my name's Tria. I'll start at the end because this is great. Who has the power to make the change we need? And what are the decision-making processes that we need for a just transition? Side note, how do we deal with the issue of planned obsolescence? How do we create societies of mutual aid? How do we reconcile honouring Te Tiriti or Waitangi if there are different wants and needs and outcomes from mana whenua? What are the values that we want to retain through a just transition? What are our shared values? How do we pursue a sustainable industrial policy in the unstable geopolitical situation in the global north or in the world? How do we hold the people who are doing the extraction accountable for leading a just transition and funding it? And how do we address the way that Bathurst has ingratiated itself into the community and convince people that they're partners without it? That's it.
My name's Lee, and this is my group. So, how do we insert the voice of communities into the fast-track process? How would you support workers and the community through the just transition process? So it's obviously coming up here and there. Is it possible to increase mining royalties and keep the dollars on the coast?
how do we hold or enforce mining companies to comply with RMA conservation law? How do we encourage young people to be involved in local community politics? Would a corporation consider just transition, or would they just close, as in the situations that we've heard recently in the North Island? How do we get away from polarisation, the them and us with the extractive industry? And, you know, when do we start looking into the alternatives to mining on the coast?
One thing that struck in my head, and I'm a bit, not upset or anything like that, but I'd really like to have seen them come along today, because they do contribute a little bit to the community and all the rest of it, and I can see that they might be a bad wolf in some people's eyes, but at the moment they do create employment up there. They are reasonable people in regards to looking after their workers, and they do help out in the community. But the golden words that come out of his mouth, which made me think you're onto it, Richard, was the fact he said, I would rather spend money and profits out of this company now in retraining and looking at a just transition model, as opposed to giving my workers a pocket full of money at the end of the job and sending them on their way. That says a lot to me. So,
And the oldest chip in, like I work for Richard, he's my chairman for Minerals West Coast, and he's actually a bloody good guy. Some people in this room may think otherwise, but he's a great guy. And I know down at Takapuna, which is getting near the end of its life at the moment, that they've made a point of making sure that they're getting certifications for their staff that might not be directly relevant to mining, but it'll put them in good stead if they do go out and work in forestry or civil contracting and things like that. So,
Yeah, and look, it's not just coal. We've got Federation Mine, which is a gold mine, which potentially has a huge number of employees and benefits. But the question, and it's a useful time to ask it, is that what else will be left, will be the legacy of that operation when it does close? And you know, and the conversation has to occur now, and to flag to Federation, because I think they too will want to work with the community in a way that people will agree, well look, your opportunity, your investment now delivers this in the long term. But actually there's no vision, there's nothing talked about.
Well, I just ask, sorry, I was just going to ask, you probably know more about what happened in Taranaki than I do, because it started before I was at the union. What was the coordinating, how was that coordinated in Taranaki from your experience?
I don't know the details. I know government put in a lot of resources to facilitate those conversations, and they were effective. They got thousands of people to have conversations around what does the future of Taranaki look like if we go down a path where oil and gas disappears. And it was a long-term thing, so that gave people some of the freedom to be more flexible and accommodating, but it was that long-term thing, but it was because more people were engaged in that conversation, it very quickly expanded beyond transition just for workers, right? It was, well, how does the agricultural economy in Taranaki, which is just as big and has just as many impacts, how does that play a role here? And so how do we transition our agricultural sector? And it just sort of,
Well, I think the Ministry of Works, we're going to call it Ministry of Green Works, Ministry of Public Works, if it involves a conversation with community, industry, unions, tangata whenua, and intentionally agrees on the pathway of what we want to be investing in for the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And that's a big, scary thing. It's kind of, you know, it's got an element of centralised planning, which is going to terrify the capitalists. But I think that's where we have to get to. We have to say, like, if we're going to get our fossil fuels, what's replacing the energy source? How are we going to how are we going to warm our homes and run our industry and run our transport? And what is that? Does that mean we build more wind turbines in Northland and build the bridge, which I hate to say Shane Jones is talking about, and I agree with him. It's like that's the conversation we need to be able to have, but it has to involve all those people, and we have to come to some sort of agreement. And I would love to have that conversation about what is the future for the West Coast if or when coal mining comes to an end. And it has to be had with the West Coasters. It has to be had with all those parties in the room. there's a couple of things to it. One, your points are both correct about the amount of energy needed to transition from our current dependence on hydropower. And if we were to build all the steel wind turbines and all the steel solar panels and get all the
And maybe
lithium
nuclear power
batteries, honestly, we'd destroy the planet a lot quicker. So like, it's not a simple, we can just go dank like that. And so that's where we have to have very serious questions about the finitude of the planet to be just extracted and logged and to converted into resources for money. And do we have an ability as a species to simply be more than a locust that destroys our own nest and goes extinct, and to actually recognise the nature of our fragility on this planet and change the way we do things?